CLion, a cross-platform IDE for C and C++. Download now.
I'm going to start with a sort of a trigger warning. Oh, come in, come in. It's not the talk on Mojo, but do come in. Take a seat. It'll be fun. Although we do have a trigger warning for explicit content, we might mention self-harm and a few other bits. I'm not sure when I became aware of trigger warning. Well, the warning explicit content I became aware of as a kid. So you've got your tapes that I used to buy, the CDs, mainly tapes back in those. That's how old I am. And you had the warning explicit content, which was a sign to the children that this is good music and I should buy it. So trigger warnings are things that I became aware of a decade ago now, because I'm going to be talking about a lot of big subjects, a lot of things that mean a lot to people and can evoke reactions, I think is probably the best way to put it. This is, when I first gave this talk, it was the first time I deployed this in anger. I have now deployed this a few times. It never gets easier. It doesn't really... Hopefully it's not going to cause you a lot to all leave, but when I first gave this talk, it was like, there's a large audience, and I hope most of them don't go. But it does involve references to self-harm. It does possibly involve strong language, because I don't really care what you say about vocabulary. Sometimes swearing needs to be done. And there are some flashing images. And loud noise. Talk is also really, really a strong word. This is more, I don't know, dramatic reading, an allegory. I don't know. There are some bits when I first gave this talk I had to read out verbatim because they were not being committed to memory. There was no way I could do it. Maybe I can do that now. There are other bits that I am having to insert in because it's 8 years since I first gave this talk and things have changed. All of which is to say this is not the introduction I visualized, either for this talk now or when I first did it. That particular introduction was this 8.5-minute audio-visual fest. Started 5 minutes before the talk was going to be given. I did this at NorDevCon. Great conference in Norfolk, you should go. And the main auditorium is also where we do the sort of the corridor conference and where the food is. So everyone's in the main auditorium, and my talk was after lunch in the main auditorium. So the idea was that the music would strike up 5 minutes before things had even started. And the opening was designed to sort of subtly convey that the conference was starting up again, would gently guide you through what else was going on with that particular time slot. Highlighted the sponsors. I used to help organize that conference, and sponsors are very important. And then it would sort of finally introduce this talk, building into what can only be described as a crescendo of music, imagery, and metaphor. If you were here for ACCU 2019, it would have been quite similar to the opening thing that I did for that, only more. It was an introduction which at that point had been 3 years in the making. I think we're at 11 years in the making now. And has never actually seen the light of day, which is probably a good thing because it's possibly a little bit egotistical to have an entire 8.5-minute long musical introduction. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be leaning so much on style over content, but then again, why should I change a winning formula? So this talk, or this version of the talk, was scheduled at the last minute. Hasn't been aired in 5 minutes, so we may be leaning heavily, 5 years even. We may be leaning heavily on style over content. This is my practice run through. We're also going to be using an audio element. Hopefully that's all going to work. And part of it is to help me out of a particularly sticky situation. This talk title is now, well, it's been in my head as a talk title now for 8.5 years. It's a sentence that I've known for well over a decade, and I still cannot pronounce it correctly. By show of hands, who here speaks German? Damn it. You'll know my hand is not up. The forerunner to this talk was done in a session in Berlin Turns out there are a lot of German speakers in Berlin. And I had access to a number of people who were able to actually read what I had on screen. They read it for me. They then listened to my attempt to render this particular sentence. They then laughed. Turns out the Germans have quite a refined sense of humor. Well, I did say since I'm less likely to find native German speakers, but apparently I do have some. But I did come pre-prepared with someone who is going to play this for you now. This is where I wake the sound man up.
Sie hören das Straftanzorchester mit ihrem Gassenhauer. Tanzt kaputt, was euch kaputt macht.
Now, I could sort of blame the speakers here, but a lot of what is going to be played today can only be described as filthy audio quality. I apologize to the sound person in the back. The irony is that there's often a lot hidden in some of this mud, and you actually need very good speakers to pick out some of it. Anyway, if you didn't quite make out what was said, there's a transcript up on the screen for you, which is not helpful if, like me, you don't actually speak German. Thankfully, I know people who do, and they are happy to humor me when it comes to random requests for translations. Now, do I have?
Sie hören das Straftanzorchester mit ihrem Gassenhauer. Tanzt kaputt, was euch kaputt macht.
So that is, you are listening to the Straftanz Orchestra with their popular hit Tanzt kaputt, was euch kaputt macht. Maybe. Now, I'm going to question the word orchestra here. Despite it clearly being in the original sentence, I'm going to probably go with band, maybe collective. They describe themselves as a collective. Orchestra is it's a strong word. Now, for those of you who have never heard of Straftanz, which is probably most of you, it's important to know that even though the nice lady pronounced the song title absolutely beautifully, as it was probably her native language, she did not pronounce it correctly. The proper pronunciation of this is Tanzt kaputt, was euch kaputt macht. Volume gets turned down. This is loud, this is shouty German electro-industrial, sometimes known as EBM. And it's important to realize that the EBM is very different to EDM, electro dance music, and something that will become very, very apparent if you put that excerpt into context. Tanzt kaputt, was euch kaputt macht. Now, that is 20 seconds of your life that you're not getting back. But you probably see why I am questioning the term orchestra, and I notice they've just come in to tell me off. Sorry. Especially when we're talking about a language that calls something as beautiful and fragile as a butterfly Schmetterling. Gotta love that word. I listen to a lot of loud, shouty, bleepy German music, which is why my German-speaking friends get these odd translation requests. And I've learned that Straftanz translates literally to punishment dance. And Tanzt kaputt, was euch kaputt macht is dance destroy that which destroys you, broadly speaking. The relevance of which will become clear later, hopefully, if this all goes to plan. So we have an introduction that didn't happen, can't be found. It's taken me over a decade to fail to produce, and a title that has taken me decades to learn how to mispronounce. We're doing well. We're doing well. And to add insult to injury, the next 80 minutes of here are sort of rattling around in my brain, and they are point blank, resolutely refusing to come out in anything like a coherent fashion, or indeed at all in some sort of cases. So, like I say, the first version of the talk I did in Germany, it was a small workshop. It was incredibly loose format. It was a very space safe, and it was with people I didn't really know, which kind of helps. the folly of going from there into a full 45-minute talk when I first did this in the largest room at a big conference in my hometown where everyone knew me was something that didn't really dawn on me until I actually got up on stage and realized that this is a dumb idea. Interestingly enough, we had almost a split personality conversation this morning as I was sat there and guys going, does anyone want to give a talk? And I went, yes, I will, while my brain's going, shut up, no, no, no. Anyway, we're here now. So this reprises a slightly long format, and it's being filmed, something that the original one wasn't being done. And that, I've discovered, is actually quite important because it's something that you can point other people to. Because I find that these talks, the people who actually come to them are not necessarily the people who need to see them. They're the people who need to disseminate them to the wider world. So, strap in. It's going to be, well, I use the word interesting here. If you've ever worked in investment banking or any kind of euphemism-laced place, interesting it's one of those words, yes. May you live in interesting times. So how do we extract this recalcitrant monologue, this deeply personal soliloquy, if you will? And more importantly, how to form it into something that is vaguely resembling a point and covers what I said I was going to cover and has at least a passing nod to the technology world, and manages to tack on years' worth of updates with zero prep time, with difficulty. In an attempt to get a jump start on this and get something down on paper, I originally thought I'd write an article for the NorDev magazine, or the Norfolk Developers magazine, sadly now defunct. And a lot of words were written, and they were restructured, and then they were rewritten, and then they were thrown away in frustration as I tried to work out what I was trying to say in a coherent and succinct fashion. And in the unlikely event that you are not an avid reader of the Norfolk Developers magazine, it didn't get written. The article was never published. I never managed to fashion it. So I suggested to Paul Grenier, who ran the conference at the time, that perhaps we could have a people track, and I could get the talk out that way. And we could do it as a presentation. And he said yes, and I said bugger, because now I had a talk to write and a track to organize. So I said fine. I want the big room after lunch. And the plan was he would say no, and then I could flounce off like a prima donna and do something on concurrency and go or something like that, I don't know. And he said yes, and I said bugger. But what transpired was what I would probably consider to be my seminal work. It started a big discussion in the community, a discussion that I have been trying to keep going ever since. It sort of highlighted something that had been bubbling under the stream, under the seam for a long time, which is fun when you consider that once you cut through all the fluff, all I really want to say boils down to a single slide with a couple of sentences on it. And these aren't long sentences either. The total number of syllables that I want to put on this one slide can be represented as a single hex digit. We've got some padding to do, of course, turn it into something readable, which is something I'll be doing to the talk as well, pun well and truly intended. But we'll start by ignoring the non-existent introduction. We'll put aside the frankly bizarre talk title, and we will work towards that single slide, which hopefully we'll have prepared at the end. So currently that slide is very, very blank. So instead we're going to replace it with this. Now you may look at this image and go, it looks like it was drawn by a 6-year-old. And I've got a hint for you. It was drawn by a 6-year-old. It was a commissioned piece of work by my eldest child. They were paid the princely sum of £1 sterling. 2016 value, I'll have you know as well. Anyone want to guess what this is an image of? It is an elephant, well done. It may not be immediately obvious, but, you know, that's kind of odd because elephants are unmistakable, are they not? You know, it's part of the reason why we use them in this context. The elephant in the room, the large thing in the corner that we are studiously trying to ignore and hoping beyond hope it'll go away. The problem is that humans are, by their very nature, imperfect creatures, and we have a hideously inefficient communication system. I was intrigued that English is the next programming language because, my God, it's imprecise. We are also riddled with a whole bunch of cognitive biases and contradictory viewpoints. Those cognitive biases are finding their way into our AI. And, you know, all of this kind of mixed up jumble is just a single human in isolation. If you put two or more of them together, it becomes a complex mess. And there are 8-point-something billion of us, which is a lot. So let's take something simple, like the color of an elephant. Elephants are grey. Thank you. Unless you're my son, in which case they are light black. And also a sort of a dark white. He was 4. This elephant has grey legs, bluish grey body, and a light blue head. But these colors that you're seeing created via an HDMI signal to a projector are subtly different to the image that I'm seeing on my laptop's retina display. And, you know, they're entirely different to this, a picture of a real elephant. Is this elephant grey? I'm going to focus on individual pixels here. Let's see if I can find, well, I can find near white. I can find brown, near black, grayish maybe, but it's not. Let's take a more exact approach. Gray is a mixture of black and white, is it not? You have black, you have white, you have gray. So one could argue that the grayest gray is exactly halfway between the two. So this is white. I think we can all agree that this is white. And this is black. I think we can all agree that this is black. Therefore, it stands to reason that this is the grayest gray. This is the midpoint. So I'm going to use some editing software, image editing software. I'm going to pick every pixel that is gray. Now you'll notice here that that's this midpoint. So I'm selecting every single gray pixel. And here is the result when I delete all the other pixels. Now this, I've got to admit, this was done on a 5K 27-inch monitor. This is a lower resolution screen. You're sat a little bit further back. So let's highlight the gray pixels. There are 2 of them. I counted. What's even better, only one of them is on the actual elephant. The other one is between the elephant's front legs. So by one definition, this elephant is exactly as gray as the background. But of course, gray is a fuzzy concept. You know, I'm being facetious here. There is no one gray. Gray is it's an idea. It's a spectrum. It's a fuzzy thing. So let's add some fuzziness into the equation. Let's add 25% radius for the gray color, allowing us to sort of average nearby pixels and select those things that are close to our color, things that we can accept as gray. I'm still not really seeing a whole load of elephant there. But some of you are looking at it going, Dom, you've messed up. You've picked the mathematical gray midpoint. The photographic gray midpoint is different. It's really this color. So fine, let's do that. Let's even allow a radius of 50% away from our color gray. Well, okay, we're beginning to see some elephant, but I mean, to be honest, the path behind the elephant is gray, according to this. But some of you will argue that photo is heavily post-processed. It's got odd lighting, there are shafts of light coming down. Perhaps it's the post-processing that is throwing the grayness out. This is not the best picture of an elephant in the world. This is a Bornean pygmy elephant. They are incredibly rare, and I took this photo. We were in the back of a four-wheel drive heading back from a hotel that's in the middle of the jungle, and the guide who had been doing these guided trips for 10 years, this was the first time he'd seen one of these. So not the best photo in the world, but incredibly lucky to have captured it. And this is straight off the camera. It's overcast, so we have some good neutral light. It's a wild elephant. It's not some sort of, I don't know, fed artificial colorants or whatever, like they do with animals to make them look better. It looks like an elephant should look, albeit from behind. And there have been no post-processing tweaks. So, you know, it should be great. Now, yes, it is an Asian pygmy elephant, slightly different to an African or an Indian elephant, but, you know, we've not specified genus here, or specifically subspecies, so, you know, all bets are off there. And we're going to use the photographic definition of grey. We're going to retain the 50% radius, and we find out that the path is still grey, with a little bit of elephant. Now, I used brown to describe a track through the jungle, but it's very clearly grey, by our definition of grey. Arguably more grey than our elephant. If we push the threshold up to 75%, finally we get a better representation of the elephant, along with a large amount of the rest of the image, which, if you recall, was predominantly green. So elephants are grey. An interesting claim. And if something as tangible and definable as an actual elephant is open to so much interpretation, just imagine how badly misinterpreted a metaphorical elephant could be. So, you've got an elephant in the room. What do? We address the elephant. We call it out. Actually, we don't. British people especially, we don't. We ignore it, we step around it, we hope it'll go away, which isn't a great strategy because it doesn't work. They rarely go away. Unless it is that you're trying to photograph the buggers, in which case they just disappear into the forest and, well, that's it. This was a real scramble to get my camera out as well. They were on the road, and it's like trying to wake my fiancé up at the time, and so the reason why we ignore elephants is because they represent thorny issues. Solutions may not be apparent. There's no black and white. People may not agree with you. In many workplaces, simply putting your head above the parapet is the last thing you want to do. There are places in the world where you just do not want to bring attention to yourself. So rather than calling a spade, you simply call it whatever you've been told to call it, and keep quiet about the fact that this is actually a shovel and not what the customer asked for. Which is just bonkers if you think about it. And yet this kind of dysfunctional group dynamic is really prevalent in our industry. I mean, we can look at a simple example, but one was on the news the other day. We had a lander arrive on the moon, pinnacle of human achievement. And it attained an attitude that was inconsistent with continued operation upon the surface of the moon. To you and I, it fell over. But let's take a look at this simple term, guys. Now, I used to work in an office that was myself and two women. And for us, in that office, guys was a gender-neutral term. I know, we discussed it. But let's imagine that we get someone new. And they view this term as problematic and as a male collective term, not gender-neutral. And furthermore, every time we use this term, every time we say guys, it is a negative experience for them because they feel excluded, misrepresented. Now, if I'm called out the first time I use it, it's a little embarrassing for both of us, but it's no biggie. Sorry, didn't mean to. We move on. I endeavored to change my vocabulary. Hopefully I enable that person to call me out if I slip up, because sometimes I do, it's an old habit. And there is no elephant. That's sensible, grown-up discussion. And if that person feels like they can't call me out, if that person feels like they can't say anything, then they have to sit there in silence and they suffer a death by 1,000 cuts. It can cause resentment in your team, it can affect morale, and ultimately you've got something that is a massive, massive elephant for someone, while someone else could be completely unaware, blissfully unaware that just their normal day-to-day language is causing someone to be upset and dislike coming to work. Now you might think that that is a trivial example, but for some people it really isn't. There are small changes and small accommodations that they ask for, and you may have absolutely no idea what it's like for that person if you don't make those small accommodations for them. It may be a huge issue for them, but if you can discuss it, bring it out into the open and have that discussion, you can get it cleared up very early. Now, historically, we have gone for the conformist approach. There's some ideal standard that we held up, and we aspired towards that standard, or at least we pretended we aspired towards that standard, and we were browbeaten to become like that, because it was the expected norm. I'm left-handed. Left-handedness was seen as bad historically. Sinister, yes. In some cultures, it's the dirty hand. You are expected to change your dominant handedness, and that is a tiny thing. And we still have a hangover from that in society today. I challenge any of you who are right-handed to take a pair of scissors and use them in your left hand. It's excruciatingly painful. It's great. I do a lot of gaming, and Razer offer, I think at last count, 32 different mice. Of which 1 is left-handed and 3 are ambidextrous, except those 3 are the same model in 3 different colors. So yeah, we're a small minority who are not necessarily catered to, and that is just handedness. That's a small thing. So let's pick on a real super easy target. The woman's place is in the home. Now, this was research that I did in 2016, and even back then there were 200 million results. That seems like an awful lot. That seems like too many. Now, you would think that this notion is massively, massively outdated, and that we as a modern society have dealt with this and have done away with it, and yet there are still people who believe quite vocally that women should only aspire to be homemakers. I visited some of the results when I was researching this, and the link at the bottom, this one, was particularly problematic. Caught my eye. The Bible teaches us that the woman's place is in the home. The Bible says a lot of things, many of which can be interpreted in many different ways. This is not religious teaching. This is intolerance and narrow-mindedness. So, the page opens with, "It is a shame that women today no longer want to be mothers and homekeepers," spelling is correct, "as the Bible teaches. Communist propaganda has lured women into the workplace, and the criminal Federal Reserve have rigged our economy so that women cannot go back due to lack of finances. It's all part of the New World Order's plan to destroy America." 2016, bearing in mind, 8 years have passed, a lot of things have no, they haven't. So, This gets a visceral reaction from me, and I could see it got a visceral reaction from some of the audience. And my reaction is only tempered by the realization, the assumption that the author can't be well. They are misguided, they are misinformed, they've been indoctrinated, and that is the only way that I can believe that someone could hold these views. But it highlights that other people's worldviews do not necessarily match your own and can actually be drastically different. Now, I'm going to hope that our worldviews in this room are not that violently out of whack, but it doesn't take a massive misalignment like that to cause friction, and friction over time causes problems. Little things left unchecked can become quite big things. I mean, just try using a communal kitchen for any length of time and tell me I'm wrong. Incidentally, I sent this with an email going, your mother does not work here. And I got a response saying, so-and-so's mother does work here, and if I find out it's him, he's not getting any dinner tonight. Now, for some, simply dumping your sinks around the kitchen after they've been used to be cleaned by some other person at some undefined point in the future is absolutely fine. They don't see anything wrong with it. It's like, it's not a biggie, it's not my job. And for others, such as myself, this should provoke some kind of severe and utterly disproportionate punishment, possibly using rusty weapons of, well, rusty versions or whatever was left in the sink, and or machine gun emplacements. This is a hill I'm willing to die on. And then the passive-aggressive notes start appearing, and it just spirals out of control from there. I noticed one of my friends came to visit me. I live in a block of flats at the moment, and they came in through the front entrance seeing the sign that says, please do not slam, underlined twice, the door at night. And he said it wouldn't be a block of flats without the passive-aggressive communal notes. But people are negatively affected by these little things. And the longer it goes on for, the more bent out of shape we can get. And it doesn't help that our own views are internally inconsistent. This is Aaron, my son, and the creator of the elephant picture. And as of this photo, they were 7 and caught me out with this wonderful piece of cognitive dissonance. Daddy, he asked, do you believe in fairies and unicorns? Tough one. I like to think that I'm a rational adult, but I don't want to crush a child's belief of fairies and unicorns. So I go with my standard cop-out and explain that no, I don't believe in them, which is why I can't see them. The magic has gone because the belief has gone. Thank you, Hollywood. Only if you view the world with wonder can you see these things. Only if you truly believe that they exist can you see the fae folk and all these mythical animals. And this is why us boring adults don't see them and why we live such boring, sad lives. Now, as someone who takes issue with the indoctrination of my children into Christianity at school, this would seem somewhat hypocritical. Because internally, I have what I believe to be a sound and robust arguments as to why believing in fairies is different to believing in a magical skying being. I do wonder how my internal arguments would hold up to scrutiny. So we're not going to examine them because they will fall down. But this is an adult argument. This is me providing adult rationale. My child found a much better argument. That they rode a unicorn straight through my argument and the plot holes. Literally rode it through. Because as you can all see, we took them to see a unicorn. And there are photos. So either Daddy is lying, which I don't think is possible in the mind of a 7-year-old child, or Daddy is wrong and needs to be subtly corrected, which is what they went for. Caught in a web of lies over something that is trivial for me and really quite a big thing for them. And the level of mental effort for me to maintain this Orwellian sort of doublethink, unicorns both exist and don't exist, we have always been at war with Eurasia, zero mental effort. I'd effortlessly created this sort of world where unicorns could both simultaneously exist and be invisible, and also be visible and be photographed, while simultaneously occupying a world where unicorns categorically don't exist, so I'm led to believe. And all with no apparent internal cognitive dissonance. And this story has become even more poignant since it was first told, because I had to go through the slides very quickly this morning and change names and gender for Aaron. Because since this was done, Aaron has come out as trans. And there are two broad reactions to this. Most people are fine. What are the pronouns? What's the new name? Let's move on with life. They make a mental note, they try and get it right, and then that's kind of the end of it. And then there are those who have a almost visible struggle with the concept of someone being assigned female at birth, and then at the age of 12 deciding that they are no longer female. They no longer identify as that. And you can see the struggle and that cognitive dissonance. Now, I am a cis, white, heterosexual male. I do not find the male body attractive in any way, shape, or form, especially my own body. I do not understand how anyone could find the male body attractive. It's utterly alien to me. But thankfully, people do find male bodies attractive. And thankfully, people have found this body attractive, or at least managed to get drunk enough to do so. And I'm kind of relieved that this is the reality, because if everyone held my beliefs on this, I would have had a very sad and lonely life. Just because I cannot put my mind in that viewpoint, just because I don't understand what it's like to be attracted to a male, doesn't mean that it's wrong in any way, shape, or form. And I can sort of put myself in their shoes because I understand what it is to be attracted to a female. And surely it must be a similar kind of thing. Incidentally, this photo was taken as we went to go see Hamilton in London. And the theatre has had a long history of people pretending to be genders and races and people that they're not. The point is that this kind of cognitive dissonance goes on in various guises all the time, through issues that are big or small. And I wonder what would happen if you could hear people's internal monologues during a sprint planning meeting, or indeed any meeting, or indeed at any time. I suspect that as a species, our survivability could be measured probably in minutes if we had telepathy. And what if we could call this out? What if we could call out this internal dissonance, rather than wrapping ourselves up in a world and in a web of ever more complex lies to ourselves? Wouldn't it be great if you could turn around and go, I have an elephant I would like to raise, and rather being shot down for saying that, rather than being called out for speaking out, that people actually listened to you? And I can tell you from experience, this is great. It enables you to do something rather interesting. It allows you to actually raise elephants about yourself. Rather than hide in shame, worried that if your work is up to scratch or whether it's not, maybe you're taking too long, maybe you're doing it wrong, you can just call it out. You can address it. It is wonderful after you've had a crap week to turn around and go, I feel like I have not had a good week. I feel like I have not been productive. And I'm sorry. And you actually find out that people are like, well, we didn't really notice, or we had noticed, do you need to take time off? Or there's never any sort of, or rarely any kind of, we noticed your shit. And if there is, you probably need to find somewhere else to be. Because it turns out that other people have off weeks as well. And they start becoming relieved about the fact that they go, you know what, this has been a tough week as well. So we can start tackling things slightly more head on dealing with the root causes of stuff, and we can put in place plans to try and mitigate any future problems. Now, my current team is mixed nationality, and we have had, until last week, 4 Eastern Europeans. And there is a culture difference between Eastern Europeans and British people. And what can be seen as quite a humorous statement for a Hungarian, for example, can be seen as very blunt for a British person. And what can be seen as a very clear statement of intent from a British person can seem like a very, very wishy-washy statement to a Hungarian. So we have had problems with friction in the team because there has been this misunderstanding of cultures. And by simply addressing it very quickly, getting the Hungarians just to put a smiley face on the end of things when they're being a little bit sort of blunt and not necessarily being rude, getting us British people to be slightly more upfront and forthright about what it is that we would possibly, if you wouldn't mind doing, please, if it's not too much trouble. Thank you. So, I have an elephant even. We are 43 minutes into my allotted time, and I haven't even started the one slide that I said that this talk comprised of. We're still blank. That's good going. We should probably work on that. I mean, I know I've got another 45 minutes that I could ramble on for, but let's not do that. Let's work on this. Let's fill it in. I mean, probably I should have started work on the slide before I got up here, but we are where we are, and you know, we'll work something out. We're a bright bunch. But I am going to need to work up to what I'm going to put up here because it's a short statement, it's a short sentence, but it's dense, it's complex. So we're gonna start with a nice easy opener. We're gonna break the ice. Something friendly. Hi. Hi. It's a good start, but it needs more. I should introduce myself. I haven't done that yet, have I? Hi, I'm Dom Davis, and I don't have a book to plug. At which point, some of you who have watched Simpsons may sort of think I'm going to come up and go, hi, I'm Dom Davis. You may know me from such talks as Agile, Smagile, and Rocket Science is Hard. And whoops, and other classic developer phrases. But that said, I've been working with a lot of students during my career, and it's become deeply apparent that my television references are not their television references, and they have no idea what I'm talking about. But I mean, this really shouldn't be a surprise. I've grown up knowing that my musical references are almost certainly not your musical references. And for reasons which were probably made brutally apparent earlier, and resulted in the sound guy running from one station to another and 2 people coming in to complain. I'm chalking that down as a win. But a few outliers also make my musical taste quite diverse, and I am going to inflict more of it on you. There is a core set of bands that I really do like, and it's hard to pick a favorite band because it really depends on mood. But if I had to, gun to head, Desert Island, you can only take one band, one album with you. It would have to be Fear Factory. In my opinion, they have produced some of the greatest albums ever, and this is possibly, for my tastes, the greatest album of all time. If you're unaware of Fear Factory, they do sound like, and I'm going to warn the sound people, they do sound like this. So, yes. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and suggest that not all of you subscribe to my love of this particular album. If you do like it, go out, buy it, it's great. Some of you may even go so far as to describe it as just noise. To which I would encourage you to listen closer on better speakers or some decent IEMs or something. But I would also point out that all music is, by its very nature, just noise. However, I take your point at face value and concede that not everyone has the same taste, and not everyone finds this to their taste. Thankfully, other genres do exist, which is a good thing, really, because ever since this happened, my ability to dance to industrial metal has been somewhat curtailed. And yes, I too went through the long-haired, angsty, angry phase. Electro-industrial covers a wide gamut of sins, but is basically very angry, four on the floor synth music. And anyone can dance to it, hair or otherwise. And while researching this talk, it became apparent that not everyone knows what four on the floor is, so I felt an example was in order. This is four on the floor. Every beat, there is a bass drum. Thump, 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 thump. So it's basically a heavy, unaccented 4/4 time bass drum. It provides a rhythm to just dance to. You don't have to think about it. Thump, 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 thump. Other things may be going on. And it's a beat that transcends genres. Wikipedia mentions disco, electronic dance music. You might recognize this. That is a beat that is still relevant even today, even if you disagree with what they've done to it in future remixes and stuff. There's a brilliant breakdown that someone's done on the internet at large. I found it on TikTok, but it'll be on YouTube, about how all of that was put together and layered, and the various synths and where they came from, and the drum beat and the offbeat parts of it, and just how that track was put together. But another way of thinking about 4/4 music is could Techno Viking dance to it? I mean, clearly, we are cut from the same cloth. Although my dad bod is far, far superior to his. So let's see. We'll start with a bit of future pop. That works. There's this. That works. That's harsh EBM. The Wikipedia entries are getting sort of sparser now. We're going to go for agritech, not agri-tech. I live in Norfolk. Agri-tech is agricultural technology. Incidentally, if I ever become very, very rich and famous, I am going to look into prosthetics for dolphins, and I'm going to call it fintech. You're welcome. So, agritech. That works. And finally, power noise. Now, this particular thing I can only find an also known as entry on Wikipedia, despite this being the side project of one of the other things that we're going to be showing.
You will not be held responsible for any hearing impairments or damage caused to you from excessive exposure to this sound.
Why is Techno Viking not dancing? I don't know. But can Techno Viking dance to literally just noise and bouncing? Absolutely they can. But it turns out that Techno Viking can also dance to Thomas the Tank Engine, so I mean... now, I do like listening to this crap, and most importantly, it is music that I can dance to at places like this. This is something that I enjoy. Although it's more and more awkward for me to go along now because I am 50 and I kind of stick out like a sore thumb. Thankfully, VR has become a thing. VR is great. You can pretend you're your own club and no one's there to judge you. That particular track was from the 2012 Slime Night New Year's gig, and that was one of the songs they played. And there are hundreds of people in there just going absolutely mental. And I love being in the middle of it. And you're waving your hands around with glow sticks, and you're just being a lunatic, and you're having a whale of a time. And when I was single and doing this, a lot of my friends were going, well, why don't you try finding a new girlfriend at nightclubs. It's like, no, because at 2 in the morning after I've been on the dance floor for 2 hours, I am not an attractive prospect. I am drenched in sweat, and I want to do more dancing. But it lets me let off steam. Okay, I'm no longer in the mosh pit, but I'm now with the glow sticks. There's still a certain amount of rah going on. Now, up until now, we've had a lot of very angry, thumpy music. But not all of my music collection is angry and thumpy and aggressive.
Cry out now and you question why. I can see a rainbow in your tears as they burn down. I can see your soul.
Now that is Sia. You may have heard of Sia before. And yes, that was from the My Little Pony film. I have the My Little Pony soundtrack on my phone. And Moana, that is a blinding soundtrack. And some of the Home soundtrack, that's quite banging as well. And if that causes you discomfort, lighten up. Some of this stuff is really good. I've even done entire talks on nursery rhymes because someone made a suggestion at a previous talk of, can't you use something that is not aggressive, thumpy music? Well, okay. We'll do nursery rhymes. And that seemingly innocuous suggestion, by the way, actually led to one of my favorite talks. I love this. It's just bizarre. I wrote a sheep microservice. It's perfect. But it also makes you think. What else could be sparked from something random? Hey, can you stop using so much of that metal? Sheep microservice. We've already discussed elephants. Elephants we've done. But if you have a safe space where you can discuss elephants, you can also have things what we call thought toast, which is a bit of an odd phrase. I believe it originated from Drop the Dead Donkey, which is a 1990s sitcom about a fictitious news organization. And it featured Gus. Gus was management, with capital management. And he would wander around the office and drop buzzwords in and these weird sort of catchphrases and sentences while trying to get people to do what he thought he wanted, regardless of whether they wanted to do it or not. And one of the phrases was, I would like you to pop that into your mental thought toaster and see if it pops up brown. And thus, Thought Toast was born. Let's pop that into our mental thought toasters and see if it pops up brown. And the reason why we co-opted it is because it's this asynchronous idea, or asynchronous way, shall I say, to raise ideas and suggestions, possibly for later discussions. Until that point, it can live in sort of the hindbrain, and you can cogitate on it. And then we can discuss it more formally and more forthrightly later. So, not every idea that is raised is going to be valid. That is a very important aspect of Thought Toast. Sometimes things can't be done. You know, Thought Toast, why don't we all just be nice to each other? It's a lovely idea. Not going to happen. But it fosters this culture of inclusion. And where you're not progressing with ideas, you can explain why. There may be business rationale as to why you're not progressing with an idea. We may have tried it in the past and it's failed. There may be something that you are unaware of that is stopping you from doing this particular thing. But you're having a discussion, not a, no, we don't do that here. And you would be very surprised about what gems this kind of thing can unearth and the ideas that it can spark. And you know, like I say, it's a two-way street. You're not guaranteed a green light for this. You are guaranteed a fair hearing. I mean, that's the important thing to say. And some ideas, even great ideas, are doomed to die due to reality in a lot of cases. I have a fantastic idea, or I believe to be fantastic idea, for an RPG game. But unfortunately, I lack the ability to do game development. I think that's important. Asset development, I think that's important. The music, the logic, everything. But I have a brilliant idea. If anyone does do game development, I'll speak to you later. So, yeah, the light of reason is going to suggest that even if I do turn around and say, I should do this, other people are going to go, you might want to start looking at perhaps producing a game first, and then work your way up. The idea is that you're providing, with thought toast, you're providing a conduit, a way to foster communication and sharing of ideas that is not going to see you shot down or, okay, that's wonderful, you do it, you now have extra work to do. If something is raised that can't or won't be done, the result is an explanation and possibly a learning as to why we can't do it, and it's still a net positive. The whole idea here is that we are engendering net positives. And we actually had, the startup that I used to run, we used to have an elephants channel. So you could raise elephants at any time, didn't have to be sort of in meetings, but we also had a formal section in meetings. So before we got to AOB in any meetings, there was an elephants section. And the majority of the time it was like, no, but sometimes things would be raised. And sometimes they were quite surprising things, tiny things, but they were raised. One thing that was raised here, 2015, I think, maybe 2016, someone from #include CPP came up and said, could you put your pronouns on your slides? And my initial thought is, well, why would I do that? I am clearly a bloke. And then you suddenly think, I may clearly be a bloke, but that normalizes other people putting their pronouns up. And it is absolutely no skin off my nose to put he, him at all. But it helps and creates a more inclusive environment. And you'll notice that most people on the Discord have their pronouns after their names. And it's a normalized thing now. And there is absolutely no requirement to wait until that section in the meeting. You can go on to elephants, you can have a private chat. You know, it is one of those things that it's an interrupt-driven process. You raise that elephant. The same with thought toast. It can be interrupt-driven. And the great thing with it being asynchronous is you can sort of say, I want to raise this as thought toast and we'll discuss it later, and then move on with the meeting, rather than the derailing that can quite often happen with something which at that moment is irrelevant, but at a later date may not be. So, we managed to do this because we were a small startup with 2 co-founders who thought that this was important and needed to be embedded from the word go. It needed to be part of the culture. We enshrined it in the culture. And we made sure that when we were employing that people bought into that as part of the culture. If you did not, you were not going to be a fit at our organization. How do you carve this kind of space out if you're a larger organization that has an established culture? How do you carve this out at a large organization that's been around for centuries and has a mass of cultural weight behind it, where there are dysfunctional teams, where communications have already broken down? And this leads to one of the things that I say that people should say more often than not, and something that AI can't do, actually. I've got no idea, I'm sorry. AI is desperate to give you an answer. Sometimes the answer is, I haven't got a clue. Sometimes the answer is, I haven't got a clue, but let's find out. It would be lovely to think that you could just pipe up and start making some changes, but history is showing us repeatedly that doesn't always work and can actually lead to harm to the people who are raising these issues. It could be a career-limiting move. It can cost you. In some countries, it can cost you your freedom. What makes it even harder is, how do you know you've actually made things a safe space? And how do you know what's actually going on with your colleagues? How do you know what's in their minds? I mean, we were a small team that practiced open and honest communication. I was in an office back then. There were 3 of us in an office who spoke every single day, and we had wide-ranging conversations about all kinds of things. One of them was going through a breakup with their partner at the time, and we were sort of discussing that and helping them through. So we've done a little bit of preparation for my slide. We've got hi. We've said I'm Dom Davis. But let's add another sentence. And when this was first shown, this was a figurative baseball bat around the head of my 2 colleagues, because it's, hi, I'm Dom Davis and I suffer from depression. And we basically went from fewer than a handful of people knowing this to well over 200 people in the community I live in knowing in 3 seconds. That was terrifying. 8 words, absolutely terrifying. I had no idea if I had just performed a career-limiting move. I had no idea whether this would affect my prospects of getting another job in the community. I had no idea what it would do to my standing within the community. But I felt that it was something that needed to be said, and this came from a bit of a weird place. It came from when I was giving lectures at universities to students, and I'd be doing coding. And you'd sit there and go, can anyone tell me why this doesn't compile? And there would be silence. And you go, no, this isn't some trick question to identify the real developers. There are 200 of you looking at me. I'm panicking. I can't see why it's not compiling. My brain's got blank. Please help. And then one of them puts up their hand and goes, I think you've eclipsed a variable, almost being apologetic. I'm terribly sorry, master programmer, but you may have made a mistake. And you go, oh, I've eclipsed a variable, thank you. And you change that. And then, how do I do this? Off to Stack Overflow or Google. These days it would be off to Copilot, and how do I do this? And the students suddenly realize that actually there isn't magical, mythical programmer. You don't leave university being some new kind of being. You just have a little bit more knowledge. And it suddenly occurred to me that actually there's a lot of us in this community who are not everything that we're putting up front publicly. And sometimes maybe hiding from sort of admitting who we are publicly because they're afraid of judgment, they're afraid of what people will say. So what if I stand up and effectively out myself? And it worked. It worked really well. The number of people who came up to me afterwards in private and admitted, me too, or I have these problems. I did a similar talk at the 2020 ACCU online, and we broke out afterwards to have a discussion, and that was brutally eye-opening, And I had a wonderful discussion, a further private discussion with someone else, learned an awful lot about OCD and what OCD actually means for people and their lives. It was a huge eye-opener, but it got that conversation starting. And this depression is another reason why I like the loud, shouty music, because it's very hard for your brain to get a grip on something and hold on to it if you are drowning out everything with the wall of noise. For example, oh no, not yet. Sound guy needs to be ready soon. Now, in the intervening 8 years since I first gave this does need a little bit of updating. I still wolf down antidepressants daily. You'll see me at breakfast, big handful of pills. So there is no good news on the depression front. It's still there, and you can claw those from my cold, dead hands. But I can add some neurodivergency. Oh, I've also got autism. I got a diagnosis of that on my birthday. Now, there is a paper that says that autism is caused by vaccines, and thousands of papers refuting this. I maintain that autism is caused by birthdays, and I have proof, and there are 0 papers refuting this. So scientifically, it is more accurate. I'm also on the tail end of autistic burnout. This is me reintegrating with humanity, if I'm being honest. I basically hibernated for a year and hid away. And it's very hard for me to explain what autistic burnout is like, or autistic shutdown. What happens when there is too much overwhelm, there is too much information coming in, there's just things closed down, you get tunnel vision, it's fuzzy. So I have tried my best to visualize autistic meltdown. And I'm warning here, loud noises and flashing images. That is a result of going through my photography collection and just pressing the down arrow quite rapidly. It worked very well. And that is actually a track that I listened to. It goes on for about another 10 seconds, but that is something that I will listen to. And I actually find comfort in. Because when you're having that wall of whatever, those thoughts, the whole thing, that is something that you can almost grasp onto like a life raft. It's something that is very bright that you can cling on to. And we don't want to be following the destructive lines of thought because that way lies madness. I, at that point, am very conscious that I'm not following my thoughts, that I am not thinking about anything that is potentially dangerous towards me. I am instead forcing myself to think on something else, and I'm doing a sort of a metaphorical fingers in the ears and a la 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 la, not going to listen. And when I say depression, I don't mean I feel a little sad from time to time. I hate the term depression. Sadness is good. Sadness makes you feel you're alive. Sadness means you're feeling something. Even if it is that sort of uncontrollable, snot-filled sobbing that I know I'm going to get from my children with, I'm never going to find anyone to love again. That is feeling. That is not depression. That is just sadness. When I found out my father died, that was an uncontrolled snotfest. That was sadness. I was feeling something. Depression is a rubbish name. Depression is a horrible name. Because depression, for me, certainly, is feeling nothing. It's an emptiness. It's a closing down of everything. All that exists, the universe, the whole lot, just seems to go. Become boring. So you can get this music and blast it into your skull and have a vague awareness that there is actually a universe out there. So the music needs to be that. It needs to give structure to my thoughts. It needs to give soundscapes for me to paint with my imagination. And it helps block out the world. I have some very good headphones, and when I'm outside, I block out the world because the world is terrifying. It's full of people. People are terrifying. I like living in my head. My head is safe. It's much safer than the real world. The real world, it absolutely sucks. It's full of people, and people are a nightmare to navigate. But there is also a balance. I can't completely retreat. I can't completely disappear into a shell and never interact with anyone. I have to exist in the world. I have to work. I have to eat. And my view of the world is a single data point. I have no idea how reliable that is. I have no idea what your views on the world are. And there's more to that. Despite the fact that I have My Little Pony on my phone, I think we can all agree that I am not a teenage girl. We all happy with that? Yes, good. And yeah, I regularly self-harm. That was a bombshell that everyone else in the room was going, oh, well, I knew he suffered from depression. Oh, my God. Now, self-harm is something that seems to be in the sort of the common psyche, this preserve of teenage girls who are going through a bit of a tough time as they go through puberty. It is not. Now, I could count on less than one hand, on the fingers on one hand, the number of people who knew that I would systematically hurt myself. Now, many hundreds, soon to be many thousands on the YouTube, hopefully, know that I self-harm, and it is not the preserve of your stereotypical young, angsty person. I do not identify as emo. God, no, I am a cybergoth. There is a big difference. We have glow sticks. And there is a whole gamut of ways in which you can self-harm, and people are not even going to notice that you're doing it. I can self-harm in public, and no one will notice. I didn't notice when I first started. It's scary. I was just fidgeting, kind of frustrated, and I was just helping myself cope, and I was just all of a sudden sat there with blood on my hands and thinking, well, that wasn't picking at my nails anymore, that was kind of gouging bits of me. That wasn't picking at scabs anymore, that was kind of, And it turns out this was news to me, men can get postnatal depression. That was a real big shocker. And one of the discussions I had when I did this in 2020 was with a woman who had had severe postnatal depression. And some of the things that their mind was telling them were incredibly hard for them to admit, because as a society, we are trained to turn around and go, well, that's a shocking thought. And so you don't mention them. It's not that you want to act on these thoughts, it's that they're happening. And we need to understand that people suffer from this, and we need to understand that we need to help people work through this. It's not always you've created a perfect little family unit. Sometimes it's a lot of struggle. And part of the problem is that I am incredibly British, which means that I am incredibly uptight and have a broom shoved very far up my arse. And so I pop a brave face on it, mustn't grumble, and I don't tell anyone, and I try and cope, because, you know, we soldier on. We soldier on. I have detailed suicide plans, because it turns out that the human body is incredibly fragile, but incredibly resilient at the same time, and also really doesn't like pain. Actually, having these plans helps, because it's like a release valve. It's not that I am going to go do this. It is, if it gets too much, there is an escape. Didn't help that my wife's profession at the time would help, but yeah. But it can still go wrong. You can end up actually making your life worse if you try and go down that route. And why not open up an avenue where we can actually have conversations? Men are useless at talking to each other about anything. Yeah, anything. We suck. We put a brave face on it. So, you know, maybe as part of this conference, how are you doing? People are going to be struggling because there's an awful lot of peopling going on. People are going to be struggling because lots of people are going out for dinner, but I can't afford it, therefore I can't go out. I'm feeling left out, I'm feeling excluded. Let's ask. For me, it's very obvious. If my mouth is flapping, I am fine. If I've gone silent and disappeared for 2 days, that's when you start worrying, and I have friends who will come after me, so don't worry. And while I've got this sort of head of steam, one of the things to do, if you find out that someone's struggling, if you find out that someone has mental problems, if you find out that they've got depression or anything like that, do not, for the love of God, go, oh, I'm sorry. I will punch you. My doctor did that. Oh, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. I'm not 7. It's an illness. I don't battle depression. I don't fight it. I don't put a suit of armor on every day and take out my sword. I suffer from it. I have it. It's just a thing. I have gout. When I tell people I have gout, they don't go, oh, I'm sorry. When I tell people I can't walk properly because I have gout, they don't sit there going, well, have you tried walking harder? Have you tried feeling less pain? It's all in your head. It could be worse, yes. And yeah, sometimes my gout flares up and I need to see a professional. Sometimes my brain flares up and I need to see a professional. No one bats an eyelid if I can't come into work because I've got bad gout. But to phone up and go, I can't come in because, well, my brain's on the fritz, it doesn't wash. Why? So, there's a whole stigma around all of this stuff. And we as a society do not know how to deal with any of it. And this is becoming brutally apparent in modern times. And I can imagine people coming up to me and going, oh, you were very brave to come up and to talk about this. Why? Would I be brave if I told you I had gout? Would someone come up and go, oh, you were very brave to admit you had gout? This is a definition of brave. Literally, ready to face and endure danger or pain. Has this talk put me in danger? Not in this country, it hasn't. Am I setting myself up for emotional pain? Well, I hope not, because there'll be a code of conduct violation if there is. So you might want to take that away as some thought toast. Ask yourself, why is it brave to talk about mental health? It's not, it's just normal. And we have other issues that we should be talking about that does require bravery to talk about, because in some countries it is illegal or immoral. That is putting yourself out there. That is putting yourself in danger. That is being brave. Me saying I have depression and autism, no. Aaron self-harms. As a parent, it's devastating. There's not much I can do about it. They still pick their lip. It's subtle. We talk about it, not because we're brave, but because we need to discuss what's going on in their young mind before it gets worse. And I'm not neurotypical. So what does this even mean? We often talk about software developers falling somewhere on the spectrum. And that's because we believe that it's a spectrum like this. We believe that you have over here is none of the autism, and then over there is all of the autism. That's not how it works. That is not how autism works. You are either autistic or you are not. My brain is literally different to a non-autistic person's brain. And then the spectrum is what aspects I have. I can be hyperverbal. I'm reasonably self-sufficient. I can hold down a job. There are other people with autism who can't communicate, they can't verbalize things. But written, they are hugely articulate. It's not that they have some kind of learning disability so they don't understand English or whatever language they speak, it's just they literally cannot talk. And sometimes I go nonverbal, and it's very hard to explain why it's so hard to speak. But if you were to communicate with me on Teams, Discord, Slack, whatever, you would not notice that there was a problem. I can actually become non-visual, where there's too much information coming in through my eyes, and I have to shut my eyes just to reduce the amount of information that's coming in. And I want to leave you with sort of a lighter. This is arguably my first suicide attempt. And for a long time, I actually thought it was related to why I am like I am, because I suffered from oxygen starvation at birth. And I was not doing this by halves. There are a couple of things you can do when you're born. One of the things is you can tie your umbilical cord around your neck. This is a problem because as you come out, your body starts to take oxygen from the air. You are strangling yourself with the umbilical cord, so you can't breathe. The other way is to tie a knot into the umbilical cord, which means as you come out, the knot tightens and you cease getting oxygen via the blood from your mother. And unless you can get the baby breathing fast enough, they can have oxygen starvation. I did both. My umbilical cord is in a jar somewhere in Mayday Hospital in Croydon. And I also decided to take 24 hours to come out. And I did so back to back, which is the hard way. And yes, with my umbilical cord both tied in a knot and around my neck. So, you know, I was trying hard. According to my mum, the doctors pulled out something along the lines, they said something along the lines of your child is in distress. British. And they pulled me out with forceps. I was blue, the color of ink blue. My head was ridged. All the plates in my head were messed around, and I was, my skull was sort of contorted by the trauma of the birth. And I asked my mother to give me a quote regarding this. Honestly, I thought I'd given birth to a freak. My mum. This is an opinion that she has not changed. Yes, and you know, I take medication to try and be less freaky, but I am who I am. I live with it. I am me. This is what I do now. I jump into virtual worlds. I have the music blaring. And I'm safe. This is what I think I look like. This is what I actually look like. This is what I think I look like. It's great. Showers in this place are horrible. You get out of the shower and you're like, oh my God, who the hell's that? Oh, it's me. Yes, a much hotter shower. Right, so, even if you can't develop the kind of safe space where you can have the thought toast, even if you can't have the type of place where you can raise elephants, you could at least have some basic tactics about helping with communication, about helping people who need help, about being allies with people. Give people a little bit of your time. Your brain may be racing a million miles an hour on a train of thought that you've been working on for hours, but you can't expect everyone else to be on the same page. Try and get to their page. Try and get to that kind of context. Give people a few extra seconds to respond. They may be collating their thoughts. Thinking time is critical, and if you cause people to snap, you can get unthought through responses. And if someone isn't understanding what you're saying, try going back to first principles and seeing if you can reframe it in a way that they can get it, rather than getting frustrated with them and just shouting at them. If that still doesn't work, unfortunately, walk away. More often than not, though, you will get with a reasonable human being this sort of aha moment. I get where you're coming from. I understand now. I was missing this particular piece of context. And, if that doesn't happen, then there is an opportunity for learning. And don't assume just because people around you are not like you and don't understand you, that they are different or bad or being obtuse or being difficult or anything like that. One of the sort of the core tenets we had at the startup was communicate, 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 and confirm. I may think I've told you something, but you may not have understood it in the same way. And these basic incorrect assumptions can cause chaos if they're not called early. I do a talk on making toad in the hoe, which ends up with this burning, fat, quagmire mess everywhere due to a few basic assumptions that I had about cooking that were wrong. Try and assume good faith. We're all on the same team. I find it amusing this doesn't work in large organizations. No one's on the same team in a large organization. The bank I used to work at was basically warring fiefdoms that were all loosely headed in the same direction. If investment banks could get organized and all agree with each other, they would be a terrifying force. But you've still got to assume this kind of good faith, because if you don't, well, then there's just paranoia and everyone's out to get you. But above everything, consider your words. Off-the-cuff remarks from you can be very damaging for others. You may put someone on edge because you've said, can we have a chat about something next week? And now I'm spending that week being, what do we want to talk about? What's gone wrong? What are you going to be saying? Am I being fired? I've actually had that before, and I was fired. Smile, they said. It could get worse, so I did, and it did. So, hi, I'm Dom Davis. I suffer from depression and autism and a whole load of other things. And that's okay. And that's kind of all I wanted to say. If you want to talk to me privately about any of this, it's my email address. If you want to chat to me after, grab me. I'm on Discord. There are people out there you can talk to as well. Just talk to each other. And I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you very much.